Okay, y'all, the judge has declared that the House settlement has got some shenanigans in it, and she's not buying it. Let's talk about walk-ons. Baker Mayfield, Texas Tech. J.J. Watt, Wisconsin. Hunter Renfrow, Clemson. Antonio Brown, Central Michigan. Clay Matthews, University of Southern Cal. Scottie Pippen, Central Arkansas. Ozzie Smith, baseball Ozzie Smith, Cal Poly. Okay. All of those guys were walk-ons. All of them walk-ons. It's reported that anywhere between 20 and 40% of D1 teams are filled with walk-ons. 20 to 40% of a D1 team is filled with walk-ons. So the judge has delayed the settlement and has said that she will scuttle the whole thing if they don't go back and work out what they're going to do with walk-ons. The judge says, y'all got to figure out a way, NCAA, to let those existing walk-ons finish out their eligibility. Judge Claudia Wilken, that is. And she says, if you can't get that done, we all going home. We can start over. I'm going to reject the settlement. Okay. So what is all this about? So the AP reports that the roster limits could cut 10,000 roster slots, primarily in Olympic, read non-revenue, sports. Now, those would seem to be some unintended consequences, wouldn't they? We're doing all this stuff so we can compensate players in revenue generating sports, and we're going to cut the necks off of those in the non-revenue generating sports. That's an unintended consequence that apparently Judge Claudia Wilken said won't happen on her watch. Okay. Now, colleges has already started rescinding offers and cutting players that would have been walk-ons in anticipation of this settlement getting approved. And she has said this is the last issue on the table. But she has also said, if you don't figure it out, we go back to zero. I'm not approving it. So all the parties are motivated to figure something out. Okay? Now, keep in mind, roster caps versus scholarship limits is what this is all about. So under the current rubric, there are a certain number of scholarships that are available for each sport. Okay? So football currently has 85 scholarships available to it. Men's soccer has 9.9 scholarships. Women's soccer has 14. Baseball has 11.7. So the current rubric is these are the number of scholarships. You can allocate them over as many players as you want. Okay. And you may choose to allocate $0 to certain players. Those are the true walk-ons. Okay. These are the folks that were playing for the love of the game. They weren't playing for NIL. They weren't trying to get collective dollars. They were just trying to play the game and be full-time students on their own dime. Now, with the change to roster limits, there is a cap on how many people you can have on the team. Okay? So, in certain schools, they would actually increase the number of scholarship athletes. So certain programs will be able to use football as an example. They have 85 scholarships now. Under the proposed settlement, they would have 105 roster slots. So D1 programs in football would probably add 20 more scholarship slots for football, at least in Power 4. Probably not the case in Power 5, right? Because you have to have the money to fund those additional scholarships. So they were simply playing games with the numbers, and there was no reason to cut these walk-on athletes other than the fact that they had to get the roster limits down. And so the judge is like, we're not doing that today. Okay. Now, there's clearly some unintended consequences. Some of these walk-on players actually have built a social media presence based on their status as a collegiate athlete. And so they're generating their own NIL. Okay, because they have their own brand and they don't need to deal with the school, right? They can do what they do on social media and able to generate money that way. Okay. Folks were concerned about Title IX and whether gender equity would apply. Okay. I already mentioned that increasing the roster size won't necessarily increase the scholarship limits. Okay. Won't translate into necessarily more scholarships. And there's this growing gap between Power Four and Group of Five. And then you have the psychological impact of cutting these athletes who otherwise would have had more years of eligibility. So the Judge Wilken, has said, you are not going to have the walk-on athletes be collateral damage in this settlement. Figure it out, people, or we all go home and we start from scratch. So I'm rooting for the walk-on athletes who just play in the game, play in the sport because they love the sport and they love the competition, even if they're playing it on their own dime. Good luck. We'll see how it turns out because it's going to turn out some sort of way. Okay. And the walk-on athletes will win because otherwise the judges be clear that they're going to start over. So let me know what you think.